Waiting on that. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for, whoa, that's getting loud. Thank you all for coming out today and contributing your time to our community and to our expansion and growth. So at this point, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Kimberly, are we in compliance with Freedom of Information Act? Great. And if everybody would join and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Y'all continue standing. Let the children stronger for us this community, respecting others, their viewpoints, find solutions for our needs. So this time I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda for today. Second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Great. So we're going to start off with appearance by citizens. Kimberly, do we have anybody signed up for comments?
Hi, how are you? We're here. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl McAllister, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Community Development with USTA South Carolina. Several of my colleagues in the tennis industry joined me here today, as well as local tennis pro Tom Ruth, a USTA South Carolina board member and island resident, and Jackie Renicky, the president of Tennis Association of Hilton Head, or TAHI. Jackie joins Wayne Lilly as the public face of our local community tennis associations, which are affiliated with USTA South Carolina and are an integral part of our overall tennis infrastructure statewide. Wayne is president of Public Tennis Inc., or PTI, and would be with you here today if he weren't up north and probably trapped by I-95 North. The fact that we have two CTAs serving this area will become clear to you today as you hear why Hilton Head is so critical to our overall tennis community. USTA is the governing body for all of tennis in the U.S. and is our mothership. The annual U.S. Open is the primary funder for all things tennis across the organization. There are 17 sections, and we are part of the southern section, the largest. The Community Tennis Associations, or CTAs, are our local market, on-the-ground network of community tennis players and providers who bring tennis to these communities every single day. In several of our most critical markets in South Carolina, we have two CTAs servicing the area. Here, TAHI and PTI. There is tremendous strength in the South Carolina Lowcountry for many things, as we know. The tennis industry is one of them. Your neighboring Charleston runs one of the top 5 adult leagues in the country, and TAHI and PTI are home to thousands of league and recreational players. Our partnerships with local clubs, providers, and stakeholders like yourselves are critical for our overall success. We have invested in our pros, our clubs, and our tennis facilities. We were first to offer unrestricted grants during COVID to tennis pros who made their living with tennis. Those small, unrestricted grants provided some aid to those in the tennis business and helped keep the lights on to put groceries on the table. TAHI and PTI partnered with us financially in that effort. We offered similar grants to tennis officials, tennis communities, and others who made their living in the sport. We currently have facilities grants projects in the works in this area. We work with organizations, towns, and communities across the country to invest free services and, more often than not, funding to help bring tennis courts back that have fallen into disrepair. There are resources here and money available from National, Southern, and South Carolina, and it is being invested here. We look forward to talking with you more about the opportunities to partner and invest. My colleagues will elaborate on the tennis message today, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Harrell. I also come from Columbia with USTA South Carolina. I'm the Senior Director for Programs and Services. I'm here to talk a little bit about the programming that's currently run for tennis here in Hilton Head. Jackie Reinecke, as Cheryl mentioned, runs the Tennis Association of Hilton Head Island, which runs the adult league programs here. This year so far, we have had over 1,500 players that participate in her league, which accounts for over 2,500 registrations. It's one of the top 5 leagues in the state. PTI, the Public Tennis Inc., run by Wayne Lilly, offers mostly youth-focused programs in conjunction with Island Rec at Chaplin Park. They're active on at least 3 weekdays, and on Saturdays, they also partner with the Special Olympics and offer adaptive tennis programs. They're also active in local elementary schools that serve as diverse feeders into these active programs. This new facility, racket facility, would serve as a hub for a variety of these local programs and would allow for expansion and access for public local courts, which are not currently available on Hilton Head. A facility with this size, with all the clay courts, are also really attractive to USTA South Carolina and USTA Southern as a hub for tennis tournaments that can come here to Hilton Head. There are a variety of tennis tournaments that have historically been run here, and it's been, quite frankly, difficult to get a lot of the local private facilities to get enough courts to be able to actively run it. To have a facility with 22 clay courts at one place would make it much easier and much more attractive for both South Carolina and our regional partners to come in and run a tournament and bring more people into the island. Folks love to come here and play tennis, not only for the courts, but also for the beach and the other things that they get to do here. So we really appreciate your time and efforts into this racket facility, and we look forward to working with you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bob Soltis, resident of Hilton Head. As I was driving over here, I was listening to an oldie station, and that says something about me, I know. And the song they were playing was Dance With Me. And I had an epiphany moment. I said, that's exactly the message I want to deliver today. I want not only you to dance with me, but to dance with the Hilton Head Pickleball Club, dance with the residents and guests of Hilton Head Island, and dance with the tourists who come here. In fact, the song that I'd like to see us sing and dance to is called Hallelujah, They're Gonna Build the Courts. The only problem is that song hasn't been written yet. And what it's going to take to get it written is for the town, when you finalize this fiscal year's budget, to include a recommendation to the town council to commit the funds to hire a consultant or a qualified contractor to take the next step, which I think is to design and cost out what it's going to take. And in turn, ask the town council to accept that recommendation. If that happens, we can all sing and dance. If it doesn't, the way I see it is we have another year to wait. I don't have another year. My dance card is almost full. I'd like to be dancing sooner than later, so I ask you, can we dance? Thanks.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. Almost 40-year resident of Hilton Head Island. Tennis has made an incredible impact, not just in my life, but in pretty much everybody I know that's been involved in tennis. Came here to work with Vandermeer, worked with PTR, Stan Smith, a lot of the different tennis businesses. That was back in the 80s. My husband was director of tennis at Vandermeer, Sea Pines, and tennis has been our life. And I also became the executive director and COO of the Tennis Industry Association. So very much involved in the research aspect. I have all the research with me here today. The Physical Activity Council is the research group that does measures all the different aspects of 130 different sports and activities. So I actually got pickleball as part of that way back when, but the Golf Foundation, the NGF, the tennis industry, snow sports, there's 8 leading trade associations that are involved in the research. So tennis has had great, especially with the pandemic, but there's now nearly 24 million players. That's been an increase and it continues to grow, 33% since 2019. It's gained momentum at the post-retirement activity. There's latent demand, and what that means, people that are very interested in playing tennis, and that's measured to about 25 million players. It remains a racket sport of choice for the greatest number of Americans. There's been an impressive climb that has seen with pickleball. It measures the same amount of people that entered, about 4 million. You may have all seen the great numbers that are being posted out there on pickleball. Be known, though, that that's a YouGov poll that was asked to, I think, about 600 people. So it was extrapolated out to that number. But the research of importance in America is a physical activity council that's performed by Sports and Fitness Industry Association. Majority of tennis takes place at a public park, 45%. The main thing to keep in mind is tennis is aspirational. To have a setting on Hilton Head with tennis is amazing. To bring this type of event, this type of structure to Hilton Head and again, I have all the research to show with you. Also to mention the impact it makes on youth. Kids that are involved with tennis, 48% get better grades, 73% are better behaved, 83% say they'll attend college. So I got lots of great research to share with you today. I wish I had more time, but all I can say, this is a great effort to bring to Hilton Head Island, and happy to share more.
All right. Mayor Perry, council members, town staff, thank you for the opportunity to address you on behalf of the Hilton Head Baseball Association. As president, I have the privilege of working with numerous volunteers, both coaches and board members, to provide outstanding baseball experience to the young people of Hilton Head. The HHB administers Dixie Youth Rec Baseball Program to Hilton Head for both fall and spring seasons. We serve over 200 players in 4 age groups. We also oversee the Dixie Boys program, serving middle school and high schoolers playing summer rec. Last summer, our modest program supplied 4 District 8 champion teams to the South Carolina State Tournament, and our 8U coach pitch team made it to the state championship game itself. This is no small feat for a small island supplied solely by the island residents and students. I'm here to speak about the support of the Crossings Park Master Plan and the renovation measures. Our program is shoehorned by the limitations of the 3 fields and the 1 batting cage at Crossings. While maintained well by the town and HHBA volunteers, the fields and complex are hampered by weather, the constant use of an active program, and the age of the complex. Our fall and spring seasons, along with the summer all-star program, place players and coaches at the fields a minimum of 5 days a week for much of the year in either games or practice. The HHBA supports 2 additional smaller fields proposed in the plan as an excellent amenity for our younger players, the 5 to 8-year-olds, in their developing baseball skills. Meanwhile, the renovation of the existing 3 fields to synthetic surfaces will provide an all-season, high-quality experience for the advanced ages. These surfaces reduce maintenance and downtime associated with weather while providing a playing experience high-achieving teams desire. The additional batting cages modeled after those that are currently existing at Crossing Park will provide a covered all-weather practice options for developing our hitters and pitchers. Finally, the renovation of the existing concessions and second-floor offices at Crossings will provide our visitors, players, and the HHBA with refreshments and amenities fitting a world-class destination. Thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to the progress and advancements made at Crossings Park as a sign of commitment to providing our island youth the highest and best baseball experience. Please reach out to us with any questions or comments you may have towards our program and the desires for reaching our goals. Thank you.
Yeah, Stan Smith. I've been here for 50 years now in Hilton Head. And you've heard from the advocates of how much interest there is in tennis in Hilton Head. And my job today is just to tell you a little bit about the history of tennis at Hilton Head, particularly professional tournaments. Back in 73 and 74, we had the CBS Tennis Classic for men. And then in 73, the Family Circle Magazine Cup, which I'm sure many of you saw, was here for about 28 years. And then it moved to Daniel Island. It was on NBC. So we had the CBS Tennis Classic for 2 years for the men and on CBS, and then NBC covered the Family Circle Magazine Cup. Always, usually 2 weeks between that and the golf tournament, which was on CBS as well. We had the World Invitational Tennis Classic. 4 men and 4 women of the top players in the world would compete, and a man or woman could win this tournament. It's one of the great concepts, and it was very popular. That was also televised, and it was shown, the 15 matches that were played were shown over 15 weeks on Sunday afternoon. The WCT Spring Finals were held here, where Lendl beat Vilas in a 5-set final. The World Couples Tournament was held at Shipyard and then at Port Royal, and that was a mixed doubles professional tournament. And then we had the DuPont All-American Tournament at Sea Pines for just American men, the week right after the U.S. Open. And we've had USTA Challenger events here as well. Later on, we had the Corel Championships, which was a senior event for those over 35. And Connors and Borg played in that event, along with yours truly. Tennis has become an integral part of the history of Hilton Head, and it really helped build, I think, Hilton Head over the years. And so I'm concerned that we can continue to do that and make Hilton Head a vacation spot for folks, but also a place where locals can play on clay courts particularly. The plan we're looking at is 16 clay courts and 8 hard courts. Over the years, the 4 major tennis facilities, Sea Pines, Palmetto Dunes, Port Royal, the Dennis Vandermeer Tennis Center, were all voted in the top 20 as a tennis resort or tennis destination by Tennis Magazine. We have also had, over the last 20 years, several junior tournaments and senior tournaments that have been played here, so it's brought a lot of business to the island. So I'm here to advocate for our tennis facility we're looking at. Thank you.
My name is Frank Babel. I'm the person who follows Stan Smith. Thanks, Stan. Well, this is another step in a journey that began more than 5 years ago when a small group of us in the Greater Island Council, sorry for that words, realized that the town's Parks and Recreation Master Plan had not been updated since 1995. There has been a tremendous amount of progress since then. In particular, Butch Casea, who led some of the study groups, and the Parks and Recreation Commission, who's still on the Parks and Recreation Board, to Jen and Taylor, and others who put together the plans, and the many citizens and volunteers who provided input. Finally, for the town's leadership who supported the program these last 5 years. Thank you for what you did. But a couple of thoughts about moving ahead. Mark Twain had many great sayings. One was, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can reach excellence. I would submit that we have reached excellence in these projects. It's now time to make some decisions, move forward, and get some shovels in the ground. Secondly, I just attended a statewide trail summit in Newbury last week. The main takeaways were around funding, building communities, partnering, and a coming health crisis. On building community, on funding, it's available from the federal government at unprecedented levels. Boy, just amazing how much is going out there. on building communities, this is one of the biggest reasons we're here looking at these projects, to help build community. The summit suggested that we need to think of communities as a verb and not a noun. As a verb, David, not a noun. All communities are different. They bring together people in place and space, and we will require more partnerships and points of connection to succeed. Most are to succeed. Okay. Regarding health, nationally, most of our kids can't or don't free range anymore. Most are automotive dependent and driven to organize events in schools. And COVID put their noses into screens where they remain, on average 9 hours a day. The consequence is that, generally speaking, our kids don't exercise and their general state of health is in decline. Obesity and diabetes are soaring, and our health system, as we know it, will be unsustainable if it continues. I mention these things because the future will require us to bulk up competencies to complement the design, build, and manage functions. To use an analogy, yes, we can build an excellent computer, but do we have the software that will get kids into our parks? We've got to think about that. I leave you with these thoughts and hope this project moves forward. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Alex Gruden. I'm a resident and president of the Hilton Head Island Pickleball Club. I like tennis. Every time I play tennis, I wear my Stan Smith shoes. Seriously, they're great shoes. They're terrific for pickleball. There's room for you. But I'd like to give this group even more support for your plan to build pickleball courts in the complex. The very authority that my fellow Islanders cited, the Sports and Fitness Industry Association, nonpartisan, said the 2021 total of pickleball players was almost double the number from 5 years previous. In the last 2 years, that number has doubled again. There are almost now 10 million pickleball players. The rate of growth is extraordinary. From one other source, nonpartisan, the Trust for Public Land, which did a study, an extensive one, the associate director of research said, the cities that have really good park systems tend to be the ones that have lots of pickleball courts. Those are also the same cities that we found are the healthiest places to live, with the best measures of mental health and physical activity. So I just thought you'd feel better knowing this. I'd also like to mention, by the way, the pickleball club is made up of people who pay an annual fee to play pickleball at the courts of the Island Rec Center, the temporary courts. And we've really grown ourselves from 100 in the last 6 years to over 600 now. Because of that, we're expanding our leadership arrangement, and you'll be hearing more and receiving any help that you need from not only Bob Soltis and myself, but also from Mike Malika, Millie Marks, and Lorraine Suger. Millie is our director. They're all directors on our board of directors. Millie is taking particular responsibility for the courts at the rec center itself, Lorraine for the courts at Adriana Lane. So we're all going to try to help you as much as we can. And we very much appreciate the consideration you've given us so far. So thank you.
Hi, town. This is Bobby Tillison here to talk about volleyball again, both about the public beach volleyball courts and the sand courts you may put within one of your parks. Yesterday afternoon after work, I lugged my portable net down to the Tiki Hut, and my 5 friends and I played from 3:30 to 6. During that time, I would say 20 different people walked up wanting to play with us. So we just had our one net, so that made it tough. And this was on a Tuesday afternoon at 4:30. I could go down there on a Saturday, late morning, and be accosted hundreds of times, probably by tourists wanting to play volleyball. So I believe that if y'all could see it within your means to put up a couple of courts on the beach, I think that would be a big plus for the parks. Regarding the sand courts in a town park, I can't remember if I told y'all this already or if I told the Parks and Rec Committee this. For whatever reason, the further you get away from the Caligny area, the less likely anybody's going to play in a park on the sand. I think it was Kirk Ladd, told me that the current plan was to put a couple of sand courts out at Barker Field. Well, the town should just save their money and not do that. So starting with the closest park, that would be Crossings, because Celebration Park doesn't have room. Crossings would be the best place to put a couple of sand courts if y'all chose to do so. Thank you.
So, thank you all for your comments. Let's go on into the workshop discussion, and we'll start off with discussion of the Chaplain Park Master Plan. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, discuss these parks with you, and to get some input on the three plans as we move forward toward adoption. In my opinion, there's not much more exciting thing to talk about than the development of Parks and Recreation. And I know that some of you here today probably agree with me because you've built your legacy on Parks and Recreation, and our community and our team is better because of that. And while I'm here sitting at the table to start this discussion with you, I'm only one of a team of experts that have been working on these projects, including some of the gentlemen up here with me, Mark, Sean, Brian, Ben Brown is in the audience. Taylor Ladd's been the project manager. Staff from engineering and facilities and stormwater have all been part of our team, as well as Brian Kinzelman that you know well, and his team at MKSK have been involved in this with us along the way, as well as many, many members of the community, some of which spoke with you today, and some of which have just been along with us as we've gone through this process. So we're going to go through these three parks, alphabetical order, Chaplain, then Crossings, and Racket. On each one, we're going to take a brief step back, just so you remember where we've come from, what we've heard from you, and then talk about where we're going. We're going to talk about the response to your questions that you asked in your February meeting, or the challenges that you kind of given to us. And then we're going to ask that the goal when we leave here is to have clear direction so that we can bring back these plans for you to adopt at your desire later this summer. So again, it's what we've heard, what we've done with that, and then what we need from you. So starting with Chaplain, I just want to talk just real briefly about the process, in case there's some people that haven't been along for the whole ride. We were here in February and had a workshop and talked about the preliminary plan. We got review and comment from town council as well as from the community. We've gotten additional stakeholder input since then. We're here today in June, a draft master plan for each of these parks to again get your feedback and feedback from the community. Many heard this morning already, and then anticipate coming back to you hopefully this summer, if that works with your schedule, after going to Parks and Rec Commission for a recommendation and ask for adoption by resolution for these three projects. Okay. I gotta talk faster next time. I usually talk fast, but that wasn't. So with Chaplin, where we started, there's a lot of text on the screen, and I don't expect you to read it, and I'm not going to read it to you. It's very specific, things like feeling like a park road and not, that the edges should be part of the park, embracing the natural resources, providing safe crossings. You probably remember the main reason why I want you to see this is because Chaplin, we have some decisions to make. You have some decisions and some input to give us today because some of the things that you asked us to do might be in conflict and might end up looking a lot like this plan when we're done if we're not thinking about that. This plan was trying to be all things to everyone. It got very crowded. That was a lot of the reaction, was that it felt like every inch of the park had something programmed on it, and there was not just space to breathe and recreate without an organized way. So that's the main point of showing you this plan. And just remember that as we go through this discussion about Chaplin. Brian, if you want to get us into.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really hard from this angle to tell, trying to read this. Is there a way we could simultaneously have this on our iPad? Otherwise, I'll move so I can read it.
Yeah, the answer would be no, unless there's access to the S drive. That's where they're all saved. We'll post them on our website like we do after every workshop. Yes, sir.
I'll move if I need to. Thank you.
Council, good afternoon. Brian Kinzelman, Senior Principal at MKSK. Thank you for having me. Got a technical difficulty here, so I'm just going to step up here, push the button. Not advancing. Try those. Thank you. Folks, again, we were back here in February to show you this plan, and we received comment from you. As Jennifer had suggested, the previous plan, all sites have capacity, carrying capacity. It's just too much stuff in one site, and it was very damaging, one, to the environment, two, parking and organization were suffering for sure. So in this diagram, we haven't changed this, but we have massaged the edges and also have some opportunities for some additional facilities as well. Central to this is organization. So it's intuitive as to how you enter the park, how you get to parking areas, how you get to this centrally located multi-use facility, which is support for any number of activities, not the least of which is picnicking and some storage and restrooms and the like. It's also accessible off of the trail system on William Hilton Parkway, another part that satisfies some of the bicycle traffic on that trail system. So we have located beach operations next to Singleton Beach, taken the basketball courts in this scheme out of the central portion of the park and added 2 more multi-use fields. We've expanded the parking, and again, it's more organized and more logical to enter and exit. Perspective rendering, just to give you a 3-dimensional view, specifically with that beautiful Folly and Ocean view in the background. This architecture that's shown in the foreground is just a placeholder. We're not proposing architecture that looks like that. We've got much more dynamic and thoughtful architecture on this island. But what it does suggest is we've got a centrally located multi-use facility that is accessed from both sides by parking, but it's a pedestrian safe zone to get from the fields to the pathways and back. So again, it's organized, there's drop-offs, there's places for folks to park and to bring families. town manager we have, folks. He's multifaceted. Again, the existing conditions, we were tasked with the notion of let's not remake things for remaking things. Let's take advantage of what we have in place that is useful and worthwhile. The tennis facility, field openings, there's a baseball field there that provides obviously open ground that can be repurposed as baseball may concentrate at crossings, and we'll come to that in a moment. So we're being very judicious with the treasure of the island and not spending money in a unrealistic way. So we've taken advantage of the parking. Let's retain as much as we can. Let's retain the tennis facility and let's improve it. Retain that existing parking at the tennis facility. Reimagine the playground in its existing location. Relocate the basketball courts if necessary to make the organization and the parking work better. So what we heard was, let's explore the opportunity for adding into that base plan, as we call it, community pool. Let's look at integrating 24 pickleball courts, 4 paddle courts, and preserving the existing tennis facility as well. And let's anchor the corner of Castnet and Singleton Beach with the beach operations facility. So let's have a quality piece of architecture, which may be multi-purpose, holding restrooms and storage and the like, but not a utility building, but a contributing piece of architecture. And let's bring the basketball court back into the core of the park as it exists today and not put it on the periphery as we had shown it in this plan. Provide for those safe pedestrian crossings of the parkway so that we can connect to Chaplain Linear Park with this improved park as well. So there's the base plan as you see it with some alternatives. And I'm going to step through these one at a time, so I apologize in advance for some of the complexity to this. But the first alternative accommodates pickleball and padel courts into the park. The second accommodates a community pool facility. And we've used the Island Rec Center as our template. Let's try to reproduce that in this location. The third and fourth alternates put both courts and the community pool in the park in different locations. So first, the base plan.
And if I could just jump in here for a minute, because it gets a little confusing as we go through, so I want to make sure everybody knows what we're looking at. The items on the base plan are the things that we're just kind of you need to do this, like move the basketball. So we're going to move it once on this plan. That's why the orange labels are there. And then that will be the same through all of the alternates. So you don't have to focus on those each one. Then they'll start layering up the different components, whether it's the pool or the pickleball, et cetera. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. At the last workshop, that was the direction, was to not change those courts to pickleball, to keep them as existing tennis courts. And so that's the recommendation in this plan, was that those stay as tennis courts. That's a really good question. I think hearing from USTA and some of the other partners that we've been talking to throughout this process, that there is a lot of demand and that this might stay the neighborhood. I just want to go hit, after work, and the rackets facility, while that's still the option there, it might be used more for events than this one would. You're welcome.
Moving forward from that base plan with alternate one, and that is to consolidate these racket facilities near the Singleton Beach site. So that's 24 pickleball courts, 4 padel courts, and the support that goes along with those on, dare I say, a site that is segregated from the main body of the park. To look at that in enlarged view, again, you can see the pickleball courts, the beach operations center, the 6 existing tennis courts that would be renovated. And then there's support for those pickleball and renovated restrooms, and vending pavilion for the tennis, shade structures, restrooms, and the like. Alternate 2 says, let's take that same very site and let's place a pool facility. This is a 25-meter pool, and continue to find a place for pickleball and paddle to exist outside of this park. This, again, is a 25-meter pool with all of the accoutrements that go along with that: shade structures, restrooms, changing facilities, support, pump house, picnic, and happy to.
Just to note, this does show 25 meter. This is like the Island Recreation Association model. But if that picnic lawn to the right of the pool facility were modified, it could accommodate a 50-meter pool if that's town council's desire. There's a lot of flexibility. Just at this stage, using that footprint is a good model for what would fit on the site.
Both pickleball and pool facility at this site have got those magnificent views to the Folly and to the deep water beyond. So this is a very, very lovely site. We don't have bad park sites.
May I ask a quick question in terms of the space that's available there? So currently there's a parking lot there. Is there additional space beyond what is already paved?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. The parking lot that's shown there on these plans is the existing parking lot, and there's significant depth back toward the Folly, if you will. The little shape to the left of the pool is an existing pond in there that's stormwater detention, but there would be enough space to build either the pool or, in alternate 3, the pickleball facility.
Yes. Okay.
In alternate 3, taking both the pickleball and the courts, if you will, and the pool, and putting them both into the park. Again, we're leaving the pool in the Singleton Beach site, bringing the pickleball into the body of the park, and the padel courts adjacent to the existing tennis. Shifting location of the dog park. No, the diagonal ones are 2 new fields that we presented to you all in February that take the place of the ball diamond. They fit within the existing landmark trees that we're trying to preserve. Yes, for that level of field. If these were collegiate competition fields, I may have a different opinion. Again, alternate 3 suggests the community pool on the Singleton Beach site. And you can see in this enlargement how we're taking this banks of 12 pickleball courts on opposite sides of this increased parking lot, moving the dog park further to the east and adding the padel along Castan. I'll come to that, Mr. Mayor. We were adding significantly to the parking. Obviously, the more program we add to this, not an either or, but a both, it starts to impact adversely the park demands. So good question. I will answer that in 2 more slides. Again, you can see the support facilities for the pool, shade, picnic pavilion, to Jennifer's point, that is able to be expanded should it be required or desired. And then the support facilities for pickleball and how those are arrayed. You can begin to see there's a lot of things being added to the park. The dark green trees are in fact those heritage trees that we are in fact preserving. Alternate 4 is the same kit of parts, 24 courts with a pool, but simply reversing those locations, putting the pool within the body of the park against the bulk of the parking, and placing, as we did in alternate 1, the pickleball on the Singleton Beach site. Again, you can see how it addresses the parking lot. It's cozied in among those significant trees in the existing lagoon. We have extended this parking fields, but all conveniently located to the pool and the other facilities. boardwalk across the lagoon to access the dog park, and then the restrooms adjacent. We've got 16 spaces at the existing tennis court. We also have 38 on-street parking spaces on Castnut. So again, you can see how that arrays itself, the courts in the Singleton Beach site and its coordinates. The renovated restrooms and vending pavilion at the existing courts are shown here as well. So now, Mayor, to your point, I want to look at the parking. The existing park has 382 spaces. In the base plan, we've been able to create 589 total spaces. We've arrayed based on American Planning Association standards for parking demands for recreation facilities. And then we've taken an 80% of that total demand to accommodate all things being up and running at one time. It's like sizing a parking lot for the day after Thanksgiving. Well, there was comment in the past that one, we've got residential neighborhoods on both sides of this park, but certainly on Burke's Beach, that on-street parking wasn't desirable from the residential neighborhoods.
It was town council direction some time ago to take out that existing parking and block it off so that people couldn't park there.
But, you know, my biggest concern with 382 spaces. Certain that we're not our residents. We're taking their kids out there. It's a huge concern that you know. So my comments go to the how much can it handle?
Yes, sir.
If I can just add, with regard to that decision-making, maybe help you, Mayor, the safety issues along Burke's Beach Road are well-known and had been established for consideration and discussion, and we, as a council, decided that it was in the best interest with regard to public safety, that those parking spots that weren't officially there, but had been man-made along Burke's Beach Road would be removed. And to change and consider changing anything like that goes completely against the former council's decision based on safety issues. So I hope that helps. We also made that same type of decision, if I may, when we were discussing Islanders Beach and whether or not there would be on-street parking there, and realizing that there was a safety issue with regard to that. And I'll continue that same train of thought as we look at Castnut and on-street parking there. I'd like to know if the town owns Castnut or if that's a county road or who owns it. But second to that, really, or first to that even really, is that there is going to be a safety concern with all those people coming into that park and those cars moving back and forth, parking, unloading, and all the rest there on Castnut Drive. Safety has to come above all else. And I can say, as a resident who lives in one of those adjacent neighborhoods, this is way too much for that park to be able to manage.
Mayor, if I might, I want to second what the mayor is saying about we need to have professional advice about which, I don't know what the terminology is in park design, is what's most efficient, most effective, the safest, whatever those are, because it's very difficult for us as non-experts to pick the proper thing. So having advice from you we don't necessarily have to follow it, but I would very much like to have that. Secondly, I think we should seriously look at a 50-meter pool because that improves a lot of opportunities for tourism in the off-season, for competitive swimming, and it may be a good benefit for us to have there, assuming that it is efficient and effective. Thank you.
If I can just speak to the pool issue, as it's been brought up a couple of times. To me, a pool may make sense. I'm not sure I actually am in favor of a town pool like this, but it would make the most sense if it were agreed to put it in a place where there are residents who may not have access to a pool. And that would not be Chapman Park.
A safe way and designed in a way that can complement the use that is right next door, the soccer fields and so on, but also provide easy access for people going to the beach so that we're actually expanding our capability in that area without creating a safety hazard.
And if I can just one more time follow up on that, since it is my district, my ward, and personal experience. Every time something happens adjacent to a residential neighborhood, and we all live in residential neighborhoods, it impacts the quality of life. So there were a number of discussions that were had by the former council, and that as well was considered. The more you make Burks Beach Road a heavily traveled road, safety considerations are one, and the quality of life to the adjacent existing neighborhoods is another. It was taken out for good reason.
Well, I'm going to have to on. I would like to know, because I don't have the statistics, what percentage of those houses on the opposite side are actually short-term rentals? How many of them are full-time residents? In other words, is it clearly a residential neighborhood, or is it a part of our resort community?
Every one of the homes that are owned there are owned by people who have a residential standing in that neighborhood. How they use their property is a separate matter.
The physical planning answer is that yes, we can accommodate parking, and we showed it to council some time ago, and it's single loaded parking on the park side of Burks Beach Road, not on both sides of it, as we have on Castnet as well, and as we're about to see as we have on Helmsman at Crossings Park, where people can park curbside, if you will, and walk into the park, not necessarily crossing the street. So there are safety issues whenever you park an automobile and have kids and parents to and fro. But we have shown that. We can show it to you again. Happy to do it. We discounted it after being asked to take that out last time.
Alex, I want to chime in as well. Go back down memory or history lane here just a moment. Hopefully this will make my comments a bit more significant. So it continues to burn my soul a bit that we're talking about a piece of ground that was once a part of my family's ownership. I am proud to say that I'm happy we are commencing Chapman Park as a place for the whole island to come and play. That is the true history of the Chaplin area. Okay? I'll go on to say that when there was not a park there, and you had places like the Bombay Waltz Place, came down Singleton Beach Road, which was a very narrow road. Only parking that you had was on the side of the road. So I too believe that the experts can help us figure out a way to get parking so that this truly can accommodate the capacity that it will bring. And with that, I will say that I've been supportive of pool being here as well. East Chaplain is one of the areas that you're not having the organized sort of activity as we're going to mention with the Rackets facility down the road. This is truly a community park. So why not have a pool? I think it's important that we accommodate that in the process and figure out parking so that everybody can come in safely and not have to be turned away because we don't have enough.
And I just want to throw out there again, a pool like this, if it becomes part of what a decision is made on, should be at a place where there's a community who doesn't have a pool. All of the homes in these neighborhoods have access to pools. And so a better use of taxpayers' money, if that were to go into a park, would be in a neighborhood where people don't have necessarily access to a pool in their backyard.
Real quick, Mr. Webb, I mean, I live in Chapel, I don't have a pool.
Well, I think that we're talking about programmatic aspects because the pool at the rec center is overpopulated as is, and can there be another, whether it's a 25 or 50? I'm not talking about that at the moment, but it's programming and it's competition. So it's not about just the personal recreation that you've got a pool in your neighborhood. We talk often about those behind the gates, those outside of the gates, and those outside of the gates use the Island Rec pool a lot. So I think that's a conversation that may not have as much validity to it as you might think.
And I'll take the time to do it now, because if we're talking about providing opportunities and access to people across the island who have not yet had that same access and opportunity, then this is not the place for it. In fact, it would be closer to the north end, and that would make the most sense to be equitable to all residents on the island.
Do I understand correctly from looking at your charts that these various alternatives have 2 out of the 3 major factors, tennis, pickleball, and pool? Each of the alternatives, you're putting 2 of them. Is that correct?
We've got one alternative has the pool, the second one has pickleball, third and fourth have both of them combined on the park.
But none of them have all 3. Pools, tennis, pickleball.
Alternate 3 and 4.
So you're basically suggesting that one of those 3 needs to be someplace else.
Well, I think if we could go through the rest of the parking, because that first page is just showing you on that base plan that based on what's on that plan, you need 509 spaces, and this plan shows 589. So we would be good with those numbers. But when you start going into alternate 1, and you see adding the pickleball, the parking demand jumps up to 620 spaces. Parking provided is still 589. So we would be short in this plan and have to either have less facilities in it or find somewhere to add more parking. If you go to alternate 2, it does the same thing. If you swap out pickleball for parking, there you see the parking demand is 589, parking provided is 589. So that shows you that this should work as shown on this plan from a parking standpoint. You go to 50 meter, that's going to change a little bit. And there are some places to wiggle a little bit more parking in. For instance, to the plan left of the angled soccer fields, there's a nice patch of green space, which would be great to keep as green space, but if needed, that parking lot could expand a little bit. When you go to alternate 3 and 4, where we've added both pickleball and a pool, the parking demand jumps all the way to 700 spaces. And with 589 provided, and that area that I just mentioned that could be some additional parking taken up with courts, we're really tapped out. And this is already assuming, like Brian said, with the 80% of demand, this is already taking into account that pickleball a lot of times is Monday through Friday in the mornings. Soccer might be Saturdays and in the afternoons, and beach is all the time, but heavy, in that 10 to 2 range. So there is some natural division of when people are going to be there. But if you're maxed out with facilities, then we don't have enough parking on this plan.
Well, Mr. Evans, before we go on, I just want to point out too that beach is also included. Parking for the beach, and there's beach operations here. There are two other elements that are also included and baked into this parking demand on all of these alternatives. So it's more than just the park program when we have the competition for beach parking during peak season, especially at this facility.
As I mentioned before, every site has a capacity that it can carry. If you calculate in the environmental areas and the tree stands and the environmental conditions, and the original plan that we launched off with, I think it was a common understanding or feeling that there was just too much packed into that piece of ground. So I'm trying to, in these parking analyses, trying to understand that quality of what a capacity is. It's one thing to put in courts. It's another thing to add the parking that brings the courts, or a pool and the parking that comes with it. So I think you'll find here as we look at these parking analyses and just looking at the park and the facilities that are taking up the green space, that we're starting to pack this thing when we get everything, tennis, courts, and pool onto one site. Just have limited geography.
I'm trying to understand the parking for each use. On the CastNet program for pickleball, 157 spaces. Is that how many spaces pickleball needs?
That parking lot currently holds 157 spaces.
I know, but
pickleball needs more than that.
Okay, that's the answer. If
120 for pickleball, but it also shares a parking lot with beach operations and the other things that go on that.
25-meter pool needs how many parking places?
100 spaces for the 20.
So those are somewhat similar.
Right.
And a 50-meter pool presumably would be.
You bump up from that. That's right.
May I also just point out one thing while we're talking about parking and we're talking about using up the potential of every green space other than the fields in this, that it is a park. And currently people go there to relax and enjoy a park setting. But when they leave, can you imagine the traffic nightmare? So we're talking about parking cars, but they do come and go. And there are safety issues and there are traffic considerations of getting those cars in and out. If you were to look on the left or the right of Burks Beach Road, the left or the right of Chaplin Park, to the right on Burks Beach Road, almost every one of those lots are now developed. That's one way in and one way out. And then you come down and you have Surfwatch timeshare there as well. And then there's a little community tucked back behind Surfwatch that has no other entrance but Burks Beach Road. So if you calculate the number of cars coming up and down and around Burks Beach Road to go to any number of those spaces that I just mentioned, it is literally thousands every day. Thus, the reason Burks Beach Road is not appropriate for parking, because there are too many cars already going on it. And now you talk about the development of Chaplin Park in this way, adding this many people and this many anticipated cars. Can you imagine that traffic jam? Go further to the left where there's Singleton, and that same scenario exists. There's a private community at the end of Singleton Beach with no way in and out and very small, narrow roads. That is a traffic hazard. That is a safety hazard. And the same if you go into the neighborhood that is right off of William Hilton Parkway or CastNet. Those are all single-family homes with cars and the traffic nightmare that you would create would be absolutely, I think the word.
I want
A couple things. I've confessed before to playing a lot of different sports and loving parks and recreation. I also like to eat a good meal, but I know when my plate is too full. And so now I think we're faced with a choice of how much to put on this plate of a certain size, both in capacity of use, the number of parking spaces, the impact on the environment, and the impact on the island, as well as the needs and desires of our community and our guests. So I think it's up to us to make some decisions about how to balance all those needs. I like the idea of another community pool. Part of my confession is I worked at a camp and I was one of the lifeguards and swimming instructors. Yes, Mayor, I did that too. He's always kidding about what have I not done. I remember teaching children how to swim. It's very important, and I think we do need more pool capacity. I confessed before, my husband's a big tennis player. I remember the USTA went to the state playoffs representing a team in Florence, South Carolina last weekend. I think it was last weekend. Time flies when you live on this fun island. And I played tennis myself, played a little pickleball, nothing like the pickleball club does. I've tried soccer. I've played baseball, I've played softball. So, you know, you can just about name any sport. I've almost tried it. So I like them all. I like serving our community. I like giving our guests opportunities as well. But just the question, I think, for staff is, have we looked at other locations for a community pool? And have we looked at other locations for the two new additions, if you will, to this park? That would be pickleball. And then the last is we have our beach operations. I know we need a site for them, but have we looked at another site? It only takes up, I think it was 38 spaces. And thank you to staff for giving me something I can write on. I did move, for those who didn't know, those screens up there, I could see the screen. That's why I moved temporarily. But now I have all the tools I need to be able to try to help out. But have we looked at thinking about, as I said, a full plate of food on a small plate, and hopefully with a small frame I'll keep. Have we looked at alternate locations for swimming pools, paddleball, padel, beach operations?
I'll start with beach operations. That's probably the easiest because it makes a lot of sense to be obviously close to the beach and on one side close to the folly or the other. And so this site is great because they can go down one end of the beach, come out, go over and get back onto the beach again without having to cross. So I think this is an ideal location. There are, with the pool and pickleball and beach operations, obviously the town is the largest landholder. We have a lot of property. If there was somewhere else that town council wanted to direct town manager and staff to look at, but we aren't here today to specifically say, if you don't want it here, it should go somewhere else. So we're trying to say what should go here at Chaplin. And then if you want something to move, then challenge, to find that alternate location.
So just for the purpose of where we stand at the moment on the two alternatives, alternative 1 and 2 basically fit there.
That's right. Mr. Mayor, to summarize it on this slide, you're reading my mail. Alternate 1, providing for courts, it fits, and it parks. And we're not, one man's opinion, damaging the environment.
I need to ask this question as well. How much, from a standpoint of permitting, does the parking come into play? If we're short 100, based off of what you provided on alternative 3 and 4, we're roughly 100 and some units, or 120 short, 121, 111 short in parking spots based off of assumed need. How much does that drive the approval process, if there is it?
I rely on Jen
for that, because the way I'm looking at this, and Don, jump in, those are standards from the American Planning Association. While our land management ordinance doesn't have specific parking provisions for padel, pickleball, pool, nature, tennis, beach, dog, they don't have that. So what we've looked at is an industry standard, a guide to tell us. That is a lot of parking, right? So American Planning Association also tells us how many parking spaces need to be at Walmart, right? So we have to calibrate it for our own demand, but that's a great starting point standard. A lot of times you're going to play pickleball and walk over to somewhere else on your park too. So there's a little bit of shared, but really that's up there in my mind to do two things. One is to draw that baseline so that we know that if we try to solve pool, pickle, soccer, dog, keep the tennis, respect what's going on with the beach, balance the park, we're right back where we were 4 months ago, if not even sooner. We can accomplish all that, but we'd have to scale back, right? It wouldn't be 24 pickleball courts. And when we came to workshop, I heard and wrote several notes, it's 24 or bust, so to speak, because that's the great capacity for tournaments. It's not just a neighborhood pickleball, 6-court tennis, and we're balanced. We are reaching for the stars, so to speak. My last comment is I have looked personally and directly for a better beach operations facility. In my opinion, there isn't one. If you just go through our beach parks process of elimination, it doesn't make sense at Fish Hall. It doesn't make sense at Islanders. There's just too much. And this location is strategic in the sense that you can head in one direction on one side of the folly and the other direction on the other side of the folly, depending if you hit the beach from Singleton or Berks. And we did that yesterday. And so what we're trying to do is keep our operations efficient and not have to travel too far down the streets to get to the beach.
Play
That
devil's
perspective.
advocate on that. You own a bunch of property on the other side of 278. Available, it could be screened. So, I mean, we do have choices. The same with the dog park. I mean, we used to go to the dog park, don't anymore, but how sacrosanct is the dog park in this location? I went out there and took a look at that lake. It's unbelievable. It's a beautiful lake, and yet we're turning our back on it and everything. I think of Spring Lake. Back when we were planning it, we put the swimming pool right on Spring Lake because of the views. And I think we've underutilized that one asset. And the dog park, how many people, I love dogs. Also cats. But we are talking about how do we create something that works for the most people in this community and brings people together. And I just don't know if a dog park fits into that equation as much as the pickleball or the swimming pool or something else. So I'm really sort of raising some pretty core issues here. Have we really asked the tough questions and utilized this piece of ground to the extent that I think it could be utilized? And I'm skeptical that we have pushed as hard as we should have. Now, as far as pickleball is concerned, the swimming pool is concerned, I think either one of them could go on that site, the Gasnet site. My personal preference, because I grew up swimming, would be a 50-meter swimming pool. But if it's not, if it's swimming, then I think we owe it to pickleball to say where. And if it's pickleball, I think we need to say we're swimming. Because it really says to me, if we are picking a place that's inferior for one or the other, then we're not doing our job. So I've got some red flags here.
Ask, where's there a lake?
It's unbelievable, Ms. Becker. If you go across the street from the tennis courts, there's a berm that probably was built when they're excavating fill for the highway. And that's a beautiful lake that's unspoiled. I mean, based on my observation, unspoiled. I didn't try to walk around the entire perimeter, but to me, that's a natural place for a walking path.
So
It's,
you're not referring then to the inlet area,
no, no, no.
referring to the other body of water. And so what would you want to put there?
I just want to take advantage of it so the public sees the beauty and so on. And it could have the swimming pool just like Spring Lake did. I mean,
So each time we talk about doing these types of things, and I'm surprised, Mr. Ames, that you bring that up, because this area is one of, as you know, if not the most ecologically sensitive area on this island and in this region. And so you're suggesting that we would remove or disturb some of that area in order to put a pool so that people can enjoy a lake? I'm just outraged that we are taking on Hilton Head Island areas that are to be preserved and to be protected, not just for our use, but for our natural use, for our ecological sensitivity on this island, things that make us who we are, and put a pool there. I'm shocked.
It's important to know and you can see it on this plan here. There's kind of a little S kind of curve. That's where the lake is. So nothing that's being proposed would be displacing the lake. Go back to the one where it's blue. And in fact, there are walking trails. You can see there's the blue, that's the existing lake. And the plan does have walking trails around it. The existing specimen trees are the dark green. And so whether it's pool or pickleball or dog park or nothing, those trees are still preserved. And that character of woodland is preserved in any of these options.
I just think that we have a park that is for people to enjoy nature. And we have animals and sensitivity here where we are to be preserving our land and not utilizing every piece of it to accommodate. We have, for instance, if we wanted to talk about space that's available, 105 acres down the street that no one's touched. This park, the parking, the congestion, the traffic, the destruction of the natural environment, and the sensitivity of that folly area should be preserved. The edges, I saw a note as we were going through here, edges part of the park. Well, as I'm looking, I'm hoping that we're not talking about exposing the park to William Hilton Parkway by removing the edges. Creating an entryway or a gateway, I believe was how it was developed, the gateway. And I see that taking away land to create some sort of entrance, impressive entrance, where what really impresses those of us who live and love Hilton Head and come here for generations, and those generations we hope to preserve it for in the future, that's not what they care about. They care about preserving the land and the environment. So I caution you going through that we don't start removing things to take advantage for the human impact that is
Alex?
being discussed.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for Mr. Town Manager. Today's exercise is give you feedback so that later on, potentially July, something is put in front of us to make a decision, correct? So you are gathering.
We are here to make a decision as to what council wants for them to be on this property so that planning can be done so that you come back to us in July or August.
Okay.
For approval to move forward towards construction.
We're looking for some sort of consensus.
That's right.
As far as
We are.
what we're packing into this ground here today.
Yes.
Okay.
While there is no vote on it, it is a consensus from us so that town staff can go back, start working on the final design that will come back to us in July or August.
Well, I'm ready to give some consensus, okay? I too want to challenge staff a bit on a few things, although I may be jumping ahead a little bit here. I know we're going to see more about pickleball later at the Rackets facility. but I'm wanting to know the demand at the moment and how much of that will be covered later on in our session before I can say yes or no to pickleball here. Okay, but I will also add that I think we can do better with the parking. I think the dog park as well with we haven't named it yet, but the park in the Mid-Island area that we keep calling the Mid-Island track. I don't like that. That's why I didn't want to say it. But it is more passive in nature. I think we have agreed to that. Maybe that's a better space for dog walking and that sort of thing. And the beach operations, I understand the necessity of being close to the Folly Split. Good thing I know how to swim. The Folly is very dangerous just walking, so trying to drive across, I understand that. But again, if there's somewhere else that is closer in this area that on town-owned property, I challenge in that area as well. And I'm just going to say out loud, absolute on the pool. Again, this is a fun, most youth-driven area to a degree. And I think that's another asset that we put in place that will help with having that younger generation around fun activities on Hilton Head, in the middle of Hilton Head. That's my
Answer about the pickleball.
Yes.
We have heard, all of us have heard that there is a lot of demand. On the rackets facility that we'll talk about later in the agenda, it is 100% tennis. There's not pickleball included in that project. So if it's not here, then, somewhere. I do have good news that y'all challenged us to look at Old Schoolhouse Park and the courts there. And we have good news that we're going to be able to reconstruct those rather than just try to fill those cracks, and that we can do it through some contracts that we already have, so we can speed that up. And I know that's not a tournament pickleball facility, but it is a step toward improving pickleball on the island. And I think that's a component for this conversation as well. Did you want to add to?
Yes, if I could, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just to be very clear, the rackets facility, as we look at balance of tennis and pickleball and other recreation programs, we were not and are not for today's session contemplating pickleball in alignment with tennis on item number 3. And when you see it, it'll make a little more sense. We were planning on, for a while, putting as many pickleball courts at this park as this park can allow. But if a pool is there and pickles too much and we're not parking Burke's Beach or Singleton, we can move the dog park, by the standard. I think that was 15 spaces. That doesn't solve the scalability of 24 pickle and a 50-meter pool. A 25-meter pool and 12 pickleball courts based upon that standard might balance here if we aren't expanding parking. So there's that. And then I can't share all the details, but I have been working diligently with my team to identify a different location on our island just in case, or perhaps in addition to, for more rackets, definitively pickle. It's confidential. We're looking at sites. We are working hard, and know that is on the top of my priority list. It's just not ripe to share today, although I wish it was. It's just not there, if that's fair to say. So it sounds like we're going in the right direction. And if I could jump in, I appreciate Mr. Brown saying yes and no, because if I hear that from all of you, we can go back to our desk with our experts, do the math, and come back to you.
I would go yes and no on the same basis that Mr. Brown.
I have to disagree. I love them both. I want them both, but I feel uncomfortable having them in the same space. I do not want to move forward unless until we have a firm location for 24 pickleball courts. I will not move forward without knowing that. I want that to be clear. My family has supported swimming pools and teaching kids to swim. I could tell you lots of stories, but I won't do that now. It's essential for more of our community to have access to swimming lessons. My heart says we got to find a place for that. I just don't know. I can't. I can't. I can't go along with that without having an actual firm commitment to a location for pickleball courts today.
But I too support pickleball courts. I have for years. I think the minimum is 24, and we need to have those in one of these parks. But I think we're here to try to determine where the priorities are for the various activities that we want to provide on the park, on this park location. I want to look at the boundaries. The boundaries to me are more than just the boundary lines. They are parking. We have to provide sufficient parking on these facilities to accommodate the citizens and others who want to use these facilities. So I am not in favor of any version of this where there's insufficient parking, according to the opinion of our experts. In terms of determining priorities, I would suggest a simple exercise, and that is we determine A-level activities, B-level activities, and 3, and it gets passed around to us, and we essentially take a vote on those various activities. What do we want to have here most? That's an A activity. What could possibly go away? That would be a C activity. We need to go through that. We're kind of going in circles right now, I would suggest, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
My priority is, going to be pickleball. Somewhat the same as Ms. Bryson. Tennis and pool are very important as well as pickleball. And we need to be in a position where we can say, here's where they're going to be, and it's an adequate situation. Now, I think trying to decide preferences for this particular park without having answers to the where is a good site for pool and where is a good site for tennis and where is a good site for pickleball, each one of them needs to have a priority someplace. David likes cats. I think the dog park is something I agree with can be elsewhere.
So, so a couple of things. I will repeat myself that parking is one aspect, traffic is another. The conditions around this park will create a traffic nightmare. So there's that. And I don't want anyone to mistake any one of our commitments to sports. You all know probably, I have 3 children who, over their 4 years of high school, earned 36 varsity letters in football, in swimming, in field hockey, ice hockey, softball, baseball, and I have 7 grandchildren. I was this last 24 hours in Atlanta watching my 4-year-old granddaughter swim in her second swim meet. I get the importance of all these sports. We live and breathe them. We had JO ball travel throughout the summers all those years and children who played on the college level. Don't mistake my commitment to sports. My commitment, though, further is to the safety of the island, to not destroy the island in a rush to do big, bright, and shiny in every corner that we have. The pickleball folks have been actively engaged in asking for pickleball and being for as long as I've been here, so going on a full 5 years, and certainly well before that. They collected, through their own fundraising efforts, monies to help the town establish pickleball. They have been at every meeting and they have done everything asked of them, and they have asked us to please provide them with an activity that is not just for the residents, but for the visitors, and will raise the prestige of Hilton Head with regard to its athletics. I'm thrilled I'm thrilled that tennis will be coming back to Hilton Head. My children learned to play tennis at Vandermeer. It's an important place to me too, that tennis holds in my heart. This park should have pickleball. It is a readily available space that's being suggested there off of Castnet with adequate parking. The dog park, I will throw my hat in the ring because we don't have another place that we've discussed with a dog park, although I think there was at one time mention at Crossings that there would be a dog park or something. We cannot just discount our four-legged animals. There are people who use that dog park on a regular basis. And while it needs to be cleaned up, I think that they're the ones we should be hearing from, just like we've heard from pickleball. We have not had in front of us a group who have come to plead their case with regard to a community pool. Just not something that has happened. So if we're talking about A level and B level and C level, well, I understand there was a survey a number of years ago where folks decided they wanted a town pool. That has not been a group of people who have come to the council meetings or the Parks and Recreation meetings or workshop meetings and pled their case for a town pool. This is a field, an area where fields have been determined to work really well. We have nature trails, I see, still in Nature Park, it's called, still there at the end of Burks Beach Road, where I can tell you that, yes, people may wander through there. There may actually be homeless people who sleep back in there. It is a highly sensitive area. There are all kinds of animals that live back there. There are rookeries, there are alligators, and it needs to be protected and preserved. We don't need another little trail walking through there to disturb that habitat. So, Kaplan Park, field sports, redoing the basketball court, the dog park, and pickleball, saving the tennis courts that are there. They're in good shape, they get used on a regular basis, and there's no reason to mess with something that's working well. To do anything other than that in that area, when we have so many other places on the island that we can look at for any other future needs that may become important, it is the wrong decision to make.
Okay, so here are my thoughts. First of all, within field sports, you have traffic that comes and goes throughout the day, so it's not all at one time. Within pickleball, you have court time that is played, and it's not all in and out at one time. So you have traffic that flows consistently, so it's not a mass exodus all at once. So I think that needs to be stated and understood. I think that pickleball definitely needs to be at Chaplin Park. I think it needs to be 24 courts because that's what we agreed upon in strategic action plan. And that was decided, pretty much decided then. And that is what's been discussed, not only amongst us, but also with the community as well. Aquatics. I actually came to town council, and I think it was 2013. Frank, so correct me if I'm wrong. And I proposed an anatorium with a 50-meter pool and a 25-meter pool. And based off of the cost to do it and run it and operate it, it would not succeed. It had to have additional amenities to it that would make it work, and that would have been water playground. We all know how the island feels about water playgrounds because they categorize as a water slide. Without those elements, it makes it an operating loss. Now, not everything we do needs to be looked in that perspective, but that's part of the conversation that we have to have going forward as to if aquatics is feasible there or not. We don't know the operational expenses that go along with it. I am all in favor of having an additional pool. I think it is great for our community. Where it needs to be, I don't know. I think we need to understand what is available to us. But from today's standpoint, I'm all in favor of, one, making certain that we're redoing this park and it is moving forward. Pickleball is a part of it. We'd make a strong look at the parking to make certain that there is enough parking and, yes, that it's also safe. This is our activity field. The dog park, if there is another option for that, to be located, then I think that needs to be explored. If it is an island track, that's great, but then we've got to get on moving that forward as well. I don't want to be in a position where we don't have the asset. So those are my comments. Yes.
Can I add a couple things based on the conversation? I think we ought to direct the staff to look for another pool location, swimming pool location, as soon as possible. And what I would suggest, hearing other comments, is that we look at, see if I have the right one, alternate one, which adds the 24 pickleball courts on the other side of Singleton Beach. And that we move the beach operations at 38 parking spaces in exchange for no on-street parking on Castnet. So it's 38 for 38. Dog parks, 15 spaces. But it looks as though the most use in the base plan and the alternates is 300 spaces for beach and 200 spaces for multi-use fields. So that's 500 that we've got to have. But if we go with alternate one, which includes the pickleball courts on that location, ask staff to move forward as soon as possible with a community pool location, move beach operations, and take out the on-street parking.
So from a standpoint of pool locations, we need to work with the town manager to determine what is available, what can be utilized, and we need to have that discussion. So that will come from staff.
Previous discussions, operate at a loss.
If it didn't have all the amenities necessary to make it viable.
Right, I understand. But having said that, I won't see.
Okay, just more.
Got everything except if Ms. Bryson can just reiterate, add on. I had a good list. I added a couple. I added find another pool location, but you lost at the parking part of it.
Sure, yeah. And in the parking, I'm looking at beach operations requires 38 spaces. That's on the base plan plus the alternates. And there's 38 on-street parking spaces for Castnet shown. So I would remove those on-street parking spaces and take out the beach operations, which should net us 38 needed for that total of 620. Well, on alternate one. And then again, moving the beach operations to another site. That's where you get the 30 out the Castnet on street.
Hearing you tell me, and my job here when I tell you that I look directly and personally at a beach operation facility, and that's the best location for our team. But I will look. But when I come back, I don't know how to find a better location. That is what I'm hearing from you today. And that is the advice that you seek from me.
Well, I would just ask or add to that where a beach operation facility falls into a priority for us. I understand the importance that the town manager is putting on it. And I just wonder how we've managed this far and the pros and cons. So there's more information,
Past, Becker, in the past, I wouldn't say we managed the beaches the way we do today, and I think that we've all admitted and recognized that over the last couple of years. It is a different day. I was on the beach with my team yesterday, and there were thousands of people. Haven't been to the beach at low or high tide on a Tuesday. Right now, please go. I'll bring you. There are a lot of people there, and that our beach team trying to operate needs space. It doesn't have to be this exact location. I think Mr. Brown brought up, we could look across the street. There's some options. What I'm trying to do is located in this area. Really, and I'll just say, not to dig a deeper hole here, but there's so much conflict here. Are all asking us to do. I don't know how to go back with a solution that I'm trying to do right now is simply understand your concern. A lot closer to clarity today than we were yesterday. And I want to make sure I'm capturing it. I heard to remove on street on Castnet counters removal of the facility building on the Castnet parking lot side, which I'm fine. And to your point, without it, we're planning a park. I think what's important at this park, the point was, what are our priorities? And soccer is a priority here. Priority, it fits. We'll make it work. It would be amazing. 25 or 50 meter pool. It'll be amazing. Pickleball, we are not going to go without pickleball. We have some work to do, but I am trying to get on with deciding on this park so that we can make that investment, right?
You're giving us
Yeah.
your best operational opportunities. And that's what we need to keep in mind is that while we're here for policy, you're there for operations to make certain things are running exactly the way they're supposed to. We're meeting the goals set out in the strat plan, excellence, and everything else that we're looking to do.
Didn't talk, and I heard a little bit of parking on Burke's Beach Road versus not parking on Burke's Beach Road. But as you went through your direction to me, you've all been silent on parking on Burke's Beach Road, except Ms. Becker. Is that the takeaway?
I made the request that the consultant staff look into the viability of that being a solution that was safe.
And while I respectfully hear you, we made that decision. And if you do the calculation of the numbers of cars that go up and down Burke's Beach Road to get to those residents and those beyond on a daily basis, it is an absolute hazard. And we all had that discussion and made that decision. And it's in the town's best interest that it remains that way. You change the character of the neighborhood when you infringe on the two bordering communities, and you create an unsafe space. What I might want to suggest as I was listening to the explanation, which I asked for, was hearing our town manager give us his best reasons for why he was asking for what he was asking for. And I heard him, and that makes those decisions easier with that information. What I also heard, which I think is important to everyone in this room and listening, is that the beaches are crowded, that our island is crowded, that our parks need to expand and infringe into the things that we count important to us, our environment and the nature around us. And why is that? Because our island is at capacity. So we don't need to keep building so that they can come anymore. We need to protect what we have to get it right. And if the town manager feels he needs a facility, he's justified that to me. But the question isn't, we do all of that and then we create an unsafe, dangerous roadway that infringes on the quality of life of the surrounding neighborhoods.
Minor comment, you've included in this design courts for paddle, P-A-D-E-L. I think that that's very forward-looking, and so I'm pleased that you are approaching it in that direction. But my understanding is these are going to be somewhat more expensive courts because they require walls. And to my understanding also is that this is a very popular sport in South America, somewhat less in the southern part of the U.S., and therefore whether it should be a priority when we think about pickleball.
Just to help Mr. Manager with the direction. I'm good with putting together a parking plan that makes sense, okay? And you have to consider some on-street, but I want to go back to the pool. If we're asking the town manager to come back with a proposed site for the pool, I would definitely still be in favor of pickleball being there, okay? I'm not asking for a full-fledged in and out nuts and bolts of pool operation and that sort of thing. But if we can identify another spot, then that would satisfy my yearn as far as pool. Okay, thank you.
I think I've heard from everybody that pickleball is supported at this site, period. I want that to be heard.
Very helpful. And forgive me for being so vocal to try to understand what I need to go do for the next couple months, because I'm urgent to get this.
Next. Okay, so just so the audience knows, at the end of our next two presentations, we'll allow some comments. We don't want to go on too long, but we do want to get to the next two presentations.
Yeah.
The next park is Crossings Park. Same process that we have been on as Chaplain, where we were here in February with the workshop. We're here now with a draft plan and anticipate being back to you this summer for adoption of a plan. This one, we heard a good bit when we were with you originally, but the majority of that was taken care of when we came back in the last workshop. So this was the plan that we reviewed with you in February, and there were a couple things that you asked us to look at that time.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Just to reiterate where we were in February, this is a perspective sketch that gives you a sense of how green it is, but also the scale of the park as a whole. What we heard from you all was to explore replacing or adding in a 400-foot line ballpark, ball field, which is we've got circled, which would be in the place of those two smaller fields. Secondly was to shift the location of the mid-block crossing to the pump track for maybe a safer location and a safer crossing for pedestrians. Got a large plans. I'll go into this one. Our original, this existing condition, we've got two 210-foot ball diamonds and one 280-foot ball diamond. Our proposal was to add two more 210-foot diamonds and to expand the 280 to 300. And that's as far as we can physically go with the protected lands, which are represented by the red line. The requested in February was to see if we can fit in a 400-foot field. And that's what it looks like in the place of those two 210-foot fields. It does have an impact on the covenant area. It would require the filling and the permitting thereof if it were even allowed to make that happen. It also puts the outfield fence right along Helmsman Way, so it's a tight fit for sure. But we were asked to look at that, and those are the ramifications thereof.
And I'll jump in here. Not only is a challenge from a site planning standpoint, you heard Judd Karstens with HHBA talk. We had a chance to meet and talk to him a little bit more detail about whether they would even have enough kids if we had a 400-foot field. There right now is not a demand for the league, the age of the kids when you're 13 playing on this level field. Most of the kids here are playing either at the middle school or the high school at that point and not still playing in a rec league. So there aren't actually enough kids probably to field two teams right now. So there's not the demand from that standpoint. We also verify that with the athletic director from the high school, and he verified that he has not seen a demand for rec level ball that would need a 400-foot field. Judd also shared with you how excited they are about growing the 5 to 8-year-old age group, which would play on those two smaller fields over to the left. We had a very positive conversation with the Army Corps of Engineers about the restrictive covenants. And the one over on the right, the existing 210 field, there's a section of restriction that comes behind that that while we have not applied for it, we've just had a pre-application meeting, just like we do. They do the same thing where we could talk to them about it. They're very supportive of the idea of being able to adjust that covenant line to allow that field to expand to the next size up. So that might be able to go to a 280, which would give them even more flexibility and still preserve those two small fields for the younger kids. So when you see the recommended plan for this park, that's the reasoning why we don't believe a 400-foot field is either needed or the way to go at this particular site.
On to the active recreation part, the Bristol
Sorry,
Sports.
Can I ask a quick question about the field? I appreciate your recommendation, and thanks for doing that research and consulting with the important partners in our community. So I think all state partners. So with the 5 fields, does that open up the opportunity to have some events inviting other teams to come in? You had the 400, even if you went that way, that would take out, one of those fields. So it seems like there'd be more opportunity. I don't know the answer to that, but that's one question. And then I have a second question, and that is, would these fields also offer opportunity for softball as well as baseball?
Yes, the answer is yes to both of those questions. Right now, Hilton Head Baseball has actually had a small event with the 3 fields. They play in some friendly competition where they'll go somewhere and then they invite those teams to come here, and they've been able to do that with the 3 fields. So 5 would certainly open up the opportunity even more so. Relative to softball or even multi-ages, these fields will be designed to be the utmost in flexibility and the highest standards of technology and the right kind of sleeves to put up temporary netting where needed, to change base paths, to have the infield or the mounds like that. It will all be designed to be super flexible and accommodate softball as well. Right now, they haven't had a lot of demand. And in fact, I believe this year there was one youth softball team that actually played in Bluffton, with their league. They had to go there because there weren't enough for them to play games. But that there would be that opportunity should the numbers grow to accommodate that.
Back to the active recreation, there's no changes from previously with Bristol Sports Park, but we've moved the crosswalk slightly, and we've provided for a raised crosswalk, and it's on a straight run of Arrow Road, so there's ample visibility to that crosswalk. That gives priority to pedestrians making that crossing. That parking field's also used for folks on the nature park and walking the pathway, or on the bicycles going into the pump track, and also the single track through the nature. Some sense of what would be accommodated there. Again, the architecture that would be the covering, and also the ancillary buildings would match the great character we have elsewhere in our parks. Mountain bike trails, nature trails for walking through that beautiful environment, and also skate park with full accoutrements there. And then the pump track. Pump tracks can be of various scales. They're typically for smaller bikes. It's not mountain biking. It's a smaller, more intense recreation of various types and sizes.
That was something that you asked in our last workshop, was for some examples of what, there is not, like with a ball field, if you say it's for this age group, there is a template of what it should be. With a pump track, the sky's the limit. And so this just gives you an example of different scale, different shape. It can fit in, and it can have the character that's appropriate for the island, both in material and landscaping and orientation.
And in and around trees. Clear cut. There'd be picnic pavilion at the pump track site as well, restrooms at the Bristol Sports Arena. Again, a parking diagram, as we showed you in February. We've realigned the parking and have a I think, a more understandable and intuitive way of getting into the park, getting to drop-off areas at the clusters of fields, and safe passage through the parking lots. So again, we've provided 288 spaces. We feel that the demand on that north portion, the active baseball, softball portion of the park, would require just under 240 of those as well. That includes the dog park as well.
Brian, could I ask you to go back one slide? Go back to
This one?
no, the one with the pictures on it. Are you proposing lights out there?
No.
Bottom right image.
No, those are lights actually on a field that's beyond that pump track. Those aren't lights for the pump track. Very, very observant eye.
I was looking.
The south portion of the site, the active rec, again, there's 103 parking spaces provided and 88 needed as we've analyzed for design. These analysis numbers, as the town manager had suggested, these are standards from APA. It's a moving target. You just don't know what you're going to need. So it's a best estimate, I will say. Also, there's on-street parking currently and continues to be on Helmsman, and there's a lot of folks who park curbside and walk in through the trees to those fields and will continue to do so. So this is sufficiently parked. I think these field additions make for a wonderful and fully functioning ballpark facility. So the draft master plan is this. We've taken those changes requested and have made those and studied that bigger field. I think it's consensus that these two smaller fields are a more sensitive way of approaching this. Happy to take it.
Questions, council? We're looking for direction again, right?
Sir.
Okay, all right. I appreciate the work that's been done. I appreciate the additional study on the I guess the length of the ball fields. I can appreciate the information that you've gathered back. I'm all in favor of the younger kids being able to develop their skill set so that hopefully when they get to the high school level, which we have 2 high schools here in Hilton Head that could use the talent. So I'm definitely in favor of that part of the plan. And since nothing else has really changed, I'm good.
I'm good.
Passing.
I'm exceptionally good, but I like this idea.
Can the dog park be doubled?
Brian, I don't know where to, I'm looking at the slide about active recreation, and I'm not familiar with hills like that on Hilton Head Island.
There are no hills on Hilton Head Island.
That's why we have it.
That's why I asked the question.
There's Don's Mountain down in Sea Pines, it's elevation 5 feet.
Although what is interesting is in that nature park area that's, wetland, there are some pretty phenomenal mountain bike trails.
It is a beautiful area.
Don, any comments?
We reviewed this. I said that I would leave the need for the baseball, softball fields to the experts running those programs on the island, and I think we heard from them, so I'm fine.
Yeah, I had spoken to some as well, and they're right in line with this. One question, the pump track, any opportunity to move that north of the parking lot of the state park?
There is.
Yes, great idea. In those same conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers about wiggling that restrictive covenant line, we're going to ask that we look at that area. The parking that's shown on this plan is really maxing out how much parking could fit there, not necessarily based on the numbers that could be needed. So I believe that there's a way to put that all together because there'll be a lot of synergy between those 3 types of sports.
The references, let's make a note once this comes forward, because I don't see the pump track parking lot being utilized for that heck of a lot. Just thinking about it, the shuttle stop there for beach access. Just,
Are you like Councilwoman Bryson? Like, did you do planning somewhere before?
I slept on Holiday Inn Express last night. So great job. I think you know the community should be excited about this. So let's move on to the next one.
Maybe you're not addressing it here. Part of facilities, I assume there'll be restrooms. Will there also be any type of food establishments?
Yes, there'll be concessions associated with the ball fields, just like there are today. There could be vending machines as well at other places so that at any time you could get something even when baseball or softball is not going on, they're not running the concessions.
Not to compete, that if there aren't any concessions there, right, if the Hilton Head Baseball Association isn't selling hot dogs, something going on, there's also ample room in the revised parking area to pull some trucks up to for those types of events.
I would like to add one last thing, that that as this is developed and move forward, that we remember the people for parks that made this happen. Because that was a private group that came together and pushed for parks for the children.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the Marshland Road Racket Facility. This is the first time we're really going through this in detail with you. We've kind of shown possibilities from a capacity level standpoint in some of the other meetings, identified through the development of the plans for the Mid-Island, for Chaplain, for crossings, the need for a facility dedicated to tennis on the island, and looked at existing town-owned property and found this site on Marshland Road.
Just a point of reference, this whole image has been rotated to the right 90 degrees so it fits on the screen. So you'll see the north arrow pointing to the lower right. But we've got a wetland along Marshland Road. We've got Broad Creek to the south, to the left on this image. There's a major utility easement that runs along that west property line. The red circles represent a 50-foot setback or clear zone around the towers that support that utility. So there's an opportunity for us to informally park underneath that easement. So those clear zones keep automobiles and folks away from. There's also this, what I think is a very significant piece of ground that is on that south side of that utility easement with Broad Creek frontage as well. And we'll speak to that in half a moment. Program we're proposing is 24 tennis courts. It's a split between clay and hard surface, a welcome center. On that smaller piece of ancillary ground, as I call it, the paddlecraft launch, a neighborhood park. We've got place for playground, small kids facilities, restrooms, also shade structures in support of the tennis.
I think this diagram is really important, and if you recall back to when we started all of the other parks, Brian and his team kind of showed us how there are really three components in all of these. And while we're calling it our working title, Marshland Road Racket Facility, the neighborhood amenities for the whole island are an important component as well. So there's an ability for anyone, whether you're there to play tennis or not, to use the site to interact with the natural environment, whether it's the wetland or the spectacular views of Broad Creek, and have a recreation component through walking or playground or kayaking as well. So that led to this draft master plan. We have had a lot of great support from many of the people that spoke early on, some advice through experts around the country that have developed tennis courts. Some of us had the opportunity to go on a 3-day tour around the Southeast, and we saw a lot of tennis. We went to Georgia, to South Carolina, to North Carolina, visiting some of premier tennis facilities to really learn what is needed for a community of our size, what are best practices, and how we would want to develop as we move forward. And that informed this plan, and we will walk through the specifics of it. I mentioned the natural landscape and the connection. So from Marshland Road, which is over on the right, there's an opportunity to connect through a boardwalk system with the wetland behind the racket facility, and then down along Broad Creek, potentially in the future connecting over to the marina, down to the lower end of the site. There's an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the history of tennis on the island. Much as we've been bringing all these parks forward, we've talked a lot about history and art and culture and incorporating it into the parks rather than it being an afterthought. And you heard Mr. Stan Smith talk about just the history of tennis and what a rich story we have, being kind of the forefront of tennis along the East Coast and really in the Southeast. And there's a way to recognize and honor that, much like at Crossings we're showing with the Champions Walk. There's an opportunity here as well. Vehicular circulation would come off of Marshland Road, access a large parking lot in the center, and then continue on to some ancillary parking serving that neighborhood park facilities. Then an enlargement, if you will. This shows a mix of 24 courts. There are 8 hard courts shown in the light blue on the top right, and then 16 clay courts. That mix was built on a lot of conversation about potential users. Adults really favor clay. Juniors start on hard courts. There's an opportunity to partner with the university at some point. That would be a hard court situation. So that's how we came up with this mix. There's a welcome center in the lower, it's highlighted there in green. One thing we learned from our visits was you can't build a big enough building, so figure out what you think you need to make it bigger. So this is showing about 7,600 square feet, but as we start programming those spaces, there's room to expand. It would include pro shop, lockers, restrooms, office space, and probably the most exciting thing is the outdoor terrace. When you go to a lot of these bigger tennis facilities, that second story deck space, and here not only being able to look out across the courts, but really to look all the way to Broad Creek and have those views and that breeze would be an exciting opportunity for our community to use. This shows some other supporting amenities with tennis pavilion that would have shade, gathering spaces, hydration, so water coolers, restrooms around the site. And then at the stadium area where the 8 hard courts are, there would be an opportunity to build up stadium seating so that you could be at a high level and see across all 8 of those courts, and then have seating come down. There would also be an opportunity to add bleachers there if you wanted to have a championship court, if you will, or a show court. There would be an opportunity to do that as well. The red kind of dashed line that goes around it shows the fenced, secured area. So that's really important with a facility this big to be able to have one point of access. It doesn't mean that, doesn't really say anything about how you operate it, whether you reserve on an app or pay to play or sign up in advance or just show up. But having that one point of access through that welcome center and then to the courts will make it easier to operate and maintain in the long run. Here's some examples of the courts that we visited. You can see in that top right corner, that's from Florence Tennis Center. And that shot is taken from the second story of their welcome center. So there's a huge porch that wraps around with tables and chairs. They have event space there, but you can see out across many of the courts at one time. Peachtree City is one that we went to. Those were their hard courts. And then Cooper Creek is one of the places we went to in Columbus. Huge facility, great partnership. That was another component with the partnership between the municipality and Public Tennis Inc. and the different groups that run tennis here on our island, and how those different partnerships can work for us here as well. There's supporting facilities. Brian mentioned the Santee Cooper power lines, and there is an opportunity to put some overflow parking if needed. But based on the same standards that we looked at with the other park, the parking through the core of the tennis facility would accommodate the tennis. And then there is parking up next to the canoe and kayak launch that would serve that, as well as the playground component. Here's some images of architectural character that Brian and his team helped select. Much like with the other parks, there's kind of a family of architecture. And then the neighborhood park provisions, the parking for the overlook, for the boardwalk, the paddlecraft, and then a playground with restroom. Some images supporting. There's the overall parking, 177 spaces shown on the site, and then the draft master plan, if you will. Like I said, it's been a great partnership that this was developed out of, but you can see it's all tennis. It'll serve a whole lot of different users across our community, as well as accommodate events, if that's something that, council wants to get into as well. At this point, just any questions or comments y'all have about tennis?
One quick question. The earlier slide showed existing conditions, and I'm looking at the wetland area that's not the one closest to Marshland Road, but the one closest to, I guess it's a common boundary with Broad Creek Marina and the
Is that
yeah. Yeah, that small one. So I'm just trying to compare that to the plans. I'm looking at an aerial online. I can't see that area. But would the courts or the welcome center be on top of that wetland, and how do we deal with that?
Yes, ma'am. And we've had meetings about that, and it is an isolated wetland. It's under the size that the Corps would support filling, and it's not of the quality of the wetland up next to Marshland Road that we would want to preserve and enhance. So this plan recommends filling that to be able to build out that full complex.
Any other wetland or tributary feed into or out of it?
No, it is purely an isolated wetland.
This was cultivated ground in the past, so you can see the very few dark green trees that are on the perimeter, and everything else that's in the body of the site is volunteer growth after it was ceased.
Just want to make sure there wasn't a tributary from there into Broad Creek. Okay.
We walked that land, and you would never even know, you never see it. Probably a tractor buried in there somewhere. Alex.
Thank you. This is our first time seeing this. I know we talked a little bit about it past. I guess the first thing that I want to say is that this is definitely going to change the landscape of this area. Okay. Once upon a time, I know for a fact that the Chisholm family, which is right next door, known for their fisherman skills. Of Miss Hump, God bless the dead. Drumfish. I don't know if y'all ever had that, but that's good eating. Where I'm going is, well, I appreciate the neighborhood park and the paddleboard launch. I'd like to see something as we have water access so that there be availability for some sort of fishing there. Okay, I think there's a dock a little bit north of this that is really bad shape. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to do something. I'd also mention that the area under the power lines, I understand that we may need additional overflow parking, but again, this may be some opportunity for some of the neighborhood businesses to thrive when there are events, food trucks, and that sort of thing. And the Welcome Center, I'm assuming that will be operated by an organization other than the town, okay? And I'm going back to the whole feeder program idea. We've got public and private schools here that have been very successful in tennis. And if this is going to be more of a formalized, I hate to use the word private, but we're going to have tournaments and that sort of thing, that some way that we structure the agreement so that some of the proceeds are going back to our feeder programs. We're having, I guess, some tennis at Chaplin, the other public tennis courts on Hilton Head. So how do we feed back into our youth here locally so that we are developing great tennis players, since we're going to have a great tennis facility? I think that not necessarily something that goes into this plan, but I want to plant that seed with us as an organization. Those are my thoughts.
I'm impressed with this park design. It meets the need that we have here on the island, which has been made clear by our citizen colleagues here today, but it also is a need that we all recognize. But I'm really pleased with the idea of providing access and viewscapes to the water there. It's a beautiful setting, so I'm good with the project. Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
I do like the plan, but I would appreciate if you could refresh me as to what is in the surrounding neighborhood.
Adjacent to the site, to the plan south here is where the Adventure Hilton Head, the ropes course, zip line, go-kart is, and south of that is the marina, and then to the north is single-family residential neighborhood, and to the left is Broad Creek. Broad Creek, the marsh and the creek are on the left side.
There would be some single-family residences close to this.
Yes, sir. Also on the other side of Marshland Road, both, above the utility easement and then across the street, across Marshland Road, there's single family.
It's the condos.
Oh, true. Yeah,
That's
condos.
Summer house.
Summer house.
Which are residential neighborhoods. So whether they're condos or whatever the case may be, there is, we do need to hear from the people who live around the complex because of the concern about, I imagine, 7 days a week, traffic and noise, lighting, and the rest. They need to be well apprised of that. I made a comment before, and I won't take away from it. I think Hilton had one of the things that made us great. I agree, Mr. Smith, is our tennis program. I would be thrilled to see it back and thriving. And in doing that, enhance all of our quality of life. But we need to make sure that the people who live around the complex are well taken care of as we move forward with that.
Mr. Ames.
Just one question, Jennifer. You mentioned parking. If there were to be some sort of a tournament, would there be adequate parking on site?
Believe in a tournament setting that we would need to look to off-site, just like we do for the golf tournament or some of our other events. And it would be real easy to get on and off if you had overflow parking at Honeyhorn, for instance, to get on and off the cross island to access the site.
Well, in combination with our discussion about the pickleball earlier and the swimming facility, and then this, I think we're teeing up 3 quality projects that will make a big difference on this island. So I'm in support of moving forward.
So while we were out there, unfortunately, I don't remember her name, but she is another cat lady on Hilton Head.
Oh, no.
It's okay, that lives on Chisholm Place, and she was very inquisitive as to why we were out there. Yes, yes, and we had a conversation with her about what we were looking to do, and she thought it was exciting. So that's one comment from the neighborhood, but yes, there does need to be more. One question for those people, just to make certain that I know the answer, but is it orientated right for the sun? Laid out
Yes,
properly?
sir.
Yes. So I think it's great. It's exciting. I agree with Mr. Ames that 3 projects we're looking to do, all encompassing is a real game changer. And I look forward to the shovels in the ground.
Just one other comment that I want to make, because it does piggyback on what Ms. Becker said. We do know that there was an outpouring of emotion from across the street when the go-kart was conceived. And so I do think that it's going to be important very early on is to sit down with Joe Run.
There was also a concern about the pickleball noise too. So for those of you wondering why pickleball here, because there was concern about that. So
Sorry, one quick question. The residential area along Chisholm, the lighting on the tennis courts, if there will be lighting, I guess there'll be some sort of down lighting and some sort of shield. So that I know there's a right of way there, but just being sensitive to residential areas as far as lighting goes.
Lighting technology has come so far and it already being downward directed and shielded with the LED lights now, there is virtually no spillover. So that will definitely be taken into account. And if I may, before I'd be remiss to, I referenced there are a lot of people that have helped us. If I could just mention, obviously, Mr. Stan Smith, Dan Santorum, Kelly and BJ Stearns, Wayne Lilly, Jan Guys, Kurt Camperman, David Lasota. I may have forgotten someone, but they have all been very, very helpful, as well as those that we were able to visit out around of just opening up and answering questions and giving us input on best practices and getting us to this point. So thank you to all of them for their support.
thank you.
And so, and Jennifer and Taylor, by the way, who put their heart and souls into this.
I'm going to open it up for some comments. So thank you all for staying and listening to what's going on and how we're trying to address these different issues. So we're going to open it up for some public comments now. So Mike, yes, right here. Please state your name and where you live.
Yeah, my name is Mike Malika. I'm a resident here in Hilton Head Plantation. First of all, I want to thank all of the council people and everybody that's spoken up in favor of pickleball. It's really good to hear. I have one question and one comment. You took a tour of tennis facilities to see what they look like. Did you do the same for pickleball?
Yes, sir, we can. And in fact, while we were there, we did look at any pickleball courts in that same area and did learn some interesting things in both, I believe it was Peachtree City and and Sumter, yes. Some best practices with pickleball in those facilities as well.
Okay. And then the comment that I had was, if the purpose of the pickleball complex is not only to service the community, but potentially have some tournaments there, there should be some thought given to some ability for visitors or people to watch. A stadium court's been talked about, or some bleacher facilities or something. So I hope that's taken into consideration. Thank you.
Other comments? In the back.
He'll take three. Hi, Jackie Reineke. I represent UST South Carolina Adult Leagues here, all adult programming for Beaufort County, not just Hilton Head. I also happen to be the current president of the Tennis Association of Hilton Head Island. First of all, thank you for, this was very informative, and us being here was great. I do have a couple of questions about the new rackets facility as well, and I'm more curious about representing the largest playing group in Beaufort County of individuals. I don't believe we were contacted at the Tennis Association of Hilton Head Island to have some input or ask some questions or to be involved in some of the discussion about what that facility looks like. And we have plenty now looking at that. I'm wondering if there would be a future opportunity for us to get some input into this and for that to be information that y'all all get, because I think it's very important that our largest demographic in the state of South Carolina is our 55 and older players. And they have a huge voice in our state, and not only from adult league play, but also from events, championships. I've been running many events on this island for a long time, and I would like for us to have an opportunity to maybe give y'all some input into that as well, and I'll let somebody direct me on how's the best way to do that.
Yeah, if we can connect right when this is over,
Sure.
then I'd love to have our team sit and meet with you and go through the plan and get your input.
Great.
All right, I got to take last minute. Thanks again, Tom Ruth. I'm the Sports Center Director at Long Cove, so I've got tennis and pickleball experience in both, love them both. My question is, in the list they gave earlier was an amazing list of people. I respect all of them, especially Mr. Smith and Mr. Geis that are here. Why we split the surfaces, that's my only question, is clay and hard at the rackets facility, sorry. That would be my only concern, because when we go to bid on an event, typically they want one surface, but anyway, thank you.
I think because here we're trying to serve our community, and that includes adults that we have heard prefer clay generally, and that the juniors prefer to play on the hard court. And so to balance, 8 and 16 were really important numbers in terms of draws for tournaments and things. So that's how we came up with that number, but through further conversation that, that could change.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jan Geis. I live in Bluffton. Was part of the first PTI Inc. On the island when Chaplin opened, and have played tennis here ever since. I've been captain, etc. I think what you are doing here is fantastic. Tom and I have talked about this. Whatever court you're building, it'll be, received with open arms. I'm 78, so clay courts are my favorite, although I play 3 times a week at Chaplin in the morning with an older group of guys. Thank God my body still allows this. My only, technically, we'll get into the weeds and I'll help if you need me. I did the USTA, I represented the USTA in Orlando, and over the 3.5 years that I traveled to Orlando, I spent 1 weekend in Orlando because there was a storm here. I couldn't, if I would get in, I couldn't get out. Other than that, I have one technical comment about the facility is parking. I wish that the parking facilities, the overflow parking, if possible, can be arranged to increase under the power easement. Liabilities involved. I understand all the right-of-way legal issues that are associated with it. I've dealt with them in too many places in the world, really. So that's the only thing, because I think if you build at a minimum there 16 courts, we can do tournaments. I'm not going to agree or disagree with Tom about the hard courts versus the clay courts. That's a matter of a larger committee decision. Mine is clay courts, but thank God I can play them both. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for allowing me to talk.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Yep. I saw a hand go up in the back. Yes, yes, sir.
My name is Mark Anders, and I sort of got dragged to this meeting today, so I didn't have a whole lot of background on some of these issues. But I've been involved in pickleball since 2015. I started the program up at Palmetto Dunes back in 2015, grew it to 24 courts. I then went down to South Beach, took a program from 2 courts, built it to 12. They now have 20 courts. And in doing all of that, my major role was in providing programming for those facilities that spurred a lot of that growth. And I haven't heard anything about what the programming is going to be like or what the structure is going to be like for the management of those courts. I did notice with the tennis courts that there's a welcome center there with a pro shop and everything else. I didn't see anything like that with regard to pickleball. And I think that there's a big fallacy out there that if you build it, they will come. But I think if you build it and you have programming, it will be organized and you'll get a much greater utility out of the facility. So if you have not considered that, I'd ask you in the master plan to please consider some of those items. Okay.
I know that has been considered and discussed in a building as well. I believe was in one of the plans. So it is part of the
Because I
concept.
know there's not a big organization within the park system to provide programming for the facilities, either tennis or pickleball. But I think if you're going to open up 24 pickleball courts, you better have some idea about who's going to manage the programming for that. And it should be as big a consideration as how many courts you have. It's not all about the courts, it's about the way it's managed. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Jen, it is correct, right? We had some of the early, yes, thank you, Brian. Those plans exist, and I assume that that's what will be worked on. And some of the discussion with regard to management was discussed as well in terms of that has been and will continue to be a focus of making sure it's done right.
Hey, Frank, I think I saw your hand up first earlier. Frank, no, what? Well, I didn't know, I couldn't see you. I didn't know you had your hand up. Frank Babel.
A couple of quick things, and great work, Jen. Thank you. Good work. So 2 things. One is there is a group called Kids in Parks. I found out about them last week. They have a goal of getting kids into parks, and they have their goal is to have 3 trail systems in every county, and they have incentives to get kids into parks. So I'll give this to somebody who's in charge. The Parks Director, I'm looking. Okay. Okay. The second is the Chaplin Park. It seems to me that we're building a great car dependency. We're designing something on something that's really passing us by. We have the finest bike ped network in the country, on the East Coast, I should say. Look at what happened in Sea Pines 10 years ago. You know, they just didn't have anything that was near the beach. A parking spot was a vulnerable spot because anybody could take it. It was a very, very bad situation. And so what did they do? You know, they put a place so they could take bikes and take them right up to the beach. And they also set up a trolley system. And I would encourage you to start looking about alternative transportation, start encouraging people to put their bikes somewhere else. E-bikes are coming, whether you like it or not, and people are going to come into those parks with e-bikes. Get them right to the beach. And anything that has a bunch of facilities, you think the day trippers are going to worry about a $20 bill? for a fine to bike in a pickleball park. They're not gonna, they'll park anywhere they can get a parking spot. So we've got to be very careful about that. We ought to start finding places we can put cars where we can get people into trolleys to get them to the beaches during the summer. And start creating an opportunity for people to ride bikes and feel good about it, so they can get their bikes out right to the beach like they do in Sea Pines where it's working, where we had maybe 100 bikes a day, and now we have 600, 700, 800 bikes in a place that only takes about 10 cars. Thank you very much.
Right, too.
Frank Soul, Executive Director, Hilton Head Island Recreation Association. Thanks a lot for taking the time to look through all the parks and stuff. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to kind of give you a few comments today. Hopefully I can do it in 3 minutes. The Chaplin Park, when you're looking at the pickleball courts, 24 is great, but let's look around to see what the neighborhood looks like. There's tons of lawsuits in this country right now on people being sued with being next to pickleball courts. So hopefully when you look at the redevelopment, we look at putting that toward the park a little bit. For the gentleman that walked up, we've been working with a group of pickleball folks here to start planning programs, looking forward for that facility, and that's what we've been doing. So we're on that already. Got to increase the parking at that park because, you know, since we took away parking on Burke's Beach Road, so I look at Mark because he's in the soccer. We take up parking on the soccer, and we've had a problem there. And since the parking disappeared after COVID on Burke's Beach Road, so please move forward. And I strongly recommend, I've known I've shared some of it with everybody, to look at that 2013 proposal that we put together for a pool. I think that's a great opportunity for us to look at that. If we find out where it's going to go, obviously we did put that toward Chaplin Park at the day, but I also think we need to look at what it's going to be because I'll just give you an example. We only had 30 swimmers at the Island Rec Center pool on Sunday. So it needs to be more than a lap pool. It needs to be some type of family pool that we need out there. Finally, Mr. Orlando's right. You're going to need some type of facilities down there at that new park, whether it's a beach or whether it's a combination of two, but you're growing that park and there's going to need to be some type of building down there for maintenance as we move forward. So I support would hit that effort right there. As far as the crossings park, hey, we can play kickball now. I mean, we talked about baseball. There's other opportunities that we can play and utilize those two new fields for. So I'm glad that you chose to go with the 210 fields. That's great. Covering the hockey rink. Oh my gosh, we can bring back hockey. And some of the sports that's kind of gone away because parents lost interest because we had to cancel games and we had to do things like that. Now we can get that back once that facility is covered. So that's really good. And finally, not only am I excited about the tennis component, but the outdoor rec component. As you know, we've been outdoor programming for a year now, but having the kayak launch out there and being able to do some other things to get kids out on the water, but adults, that's really great too. So, 22 seconds left. So,
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Mike said and say, great discussion, a lot of good ideas. We put some stakes in the ground. What's the next step? That's the question.
Well, the next step is to come back in July, August, and see what has been designed and developed based off of the input from today. That's the next step. Do you have a comment? Come on up.
Again, Judd Carson's with the HHBA. I've actually got to go get kids to a district game, so this wrapped up perfectly. But if anybody had anything off the top of their brain right now that I could answer, otherwise, Jennifer and staff and our consultants are doing a fantastic job. I'll just say, let's keep it going. So, and if I can take 2 minutes and 30 seconds to say thank you, 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 thank you. So. All right, thanks, y'all.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Any other comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you all again for being here. You have some more?
Just real quick, thank my team, Sean, Jen, her whole team, Brian, Jen, and Mayor and Council, thank you. Your feedback's important. It sounds like we have 2 of 3 pretty good down pat, and we're going to work hard on that third one to to make sense of it. And so stay tuned. Thank you for your time today.
We are adjourned.